There is a particular kind of man who can spend months convincing himself that he feels nothing for you while his behavior keeps exposing everything he refuses to admit. He does not necessarily become colder because he does not care. Sometimes he becomes colder because caring has become impossible for him to control. You notice the contradiction before you understand it. He remembers things he should have forgotten, notices changes he pretends not to notice, finds reasons to remain close, then suddenly creates distance when the closeness begins to feel too real. And the most confusing part is that he may look completely calm while doing it, as if nothing is happening inside him. But sometimes the calmness is not evidence of indifference. It is evidence of resistance. What he is resisting is not necessarily you. It is what you represent to him. There are people we can like without consequence because the feeling remains comfortably outside our sense of identity. Then there is the person who makes us behave differently from the person we believe ourselves to be. That is where attraction becomes psychologically dangerous. If he has always imagined himself as controlled, independent, emotionally disciplined, or incapable of becoming attached easily, developing feelings for you creates a conflict that has very little to do with romance and everything to do with control. Suddenly there is another person whose presence can influence his mood, disturb his concentration, alter his decisions, and make him care about an outcome he cannot guarantee. For someone who depends heavily on emotional control, that can feel less like falling in love and more like losing territory inside himself. This is why his behavior may seem strangely inconsistent around you. When he feels emotionally safe, he can become unusually attentive. He listens more carefully. He notices small details. He becomes curious about things that normally would not matter to him. He may find himself wanting to know how you think, what makes you uncomfortable, what makes you laugh, what kind of person you become when nobody is watching. But then something changes. The moment he realizes how much attention he has given you, he may pull himself back. Not because the interest disappeared, but because he suddenly became aware of it. The feeling becomes visible to him, and visibility creates pressure. He begins monitoring himself, and once a man starts monitoring his own feelings, his behavior can become painfully confusing. You may have experienced this as a strange rhythm of closeness and distance. There are moments when he seems almost unable to hide how drawn he is to you, followed by moments when he acts as though the previous warmth never happened. The mistake is assuming that one version must be fake. Sometimes both versions are real. The man who moves toward you is responding to what he genuinely feels, while the man who retreats is responding to what those feelings threaten to become. He can want your presence and still resist intimacy. He can miss you and still convince himself that distance is better. He can be affected by you and still refuse to call the feeling attraction because admitting the word would force him to confront everything attached to it. And this is where denial becomes more complicated than simply saying, "I don't like her." Real denial rarely erases a feeling. It changes the explanation for the feeling. Instead of admitting that he looks for you because he wants your presence, he tells himself that he simply enjoys your company. Instead of recognizing jealousy, he calls it curiosity. Instead of admitting that your opinion matters more than it should, he tells himself that he is merely being observant. The mind is remarkably creative when it wants to protect an existing self-image. It does not always remove the evidence. Sometimes it gives the evidence another name. That is why the smallest reactions can become more revealing than obvious displays of affection. Watch what happens when your attention moves elsewhere. Watch whether his mood changes when someone else becomes important to you. Watch whether he becomes unusually aware of who is around you, what you are doing, or how you are responding to other people. A man who has genuinely accepted that he feels nothing has little reason to constantly negotiate with his own reactions. But a man who keeps insisting that he does not care may become strangely preoccupied with proving that he does not care. And the effort required to prove indifference can reveal how much emotional energy the situation is actually consuming. There is another sign that is easy to misunderstand. He may become more critical of you precisely when his feelings intensify. Not cruel, necessarily, but unusually analytical. He notices imperfections that other people overlook. He may focus on reasons why the two of you would not work, why the timing is wrong, why your personalities are different, why getting closer would complicate things. On the surface, it sounds rational. Underneath, it can function as emotional defense. If he can build a convincing case against the possibility of you, he never has to ask himself why the possibility matters so much in the first place. Because accepting feelings means accepting uncertainty. It means admitting that another person has become significant without knowing what will happen next. Some people can tolerate that uncertainty easily. Others need emotional outcomes to remain predictable. For them, attraction becomes uncomfortable precisely when it stops being theoretical. As long as you are simply someone he finds attractive, everything remains manageable. But when you become someone whose absence changes the atmosphere, whose approval carries weight, whose disappointment affects him, the feeling crosses a psychological boundary. You are no longer merely attractive. You have become emotionally relevant. And emotional relevance is much harder to deny. This can also explain why he may behave differently when you are unexpectedly vulnerable. A person who is merely attracted to your appearance can remain relatively detached. But when he becomes emotionally invested, your pain can affect him in ways he did not anticipate. He may become protective, unusually attentive, or visibly uncomfortable when he sees you hurting. Sometimes he will not know what to say because the emotion he is experiencing is larger than the role he has assigned himself around you. He may want to move closer while simultaneously fearing what the closeness implies. So he does something confusing instead. He stays near without admitting why. There is often a moment when he realizes that you have become a reference point in his internal world. He starts comparing experiences to conversations with you. He imagines what you would think about something. He remembers how you reacted to something long after the moment has passed. Certain places, situations, or ordinary details begin carrying an association with you. None of this requires a dramatic confession. In fact, the most powerful feelings often reveal themselves through repetition rather than spectacle. The person has simply begun occupying mental space without being invited. And that is precisely what makes denial so fragile. You can consciously decide not to pursue someone. You can decide that the circumstances are inconvenient, that the timing is wrong, that the connection is too complicated, or that nothing should happen. But you cannot always decide what your mind does when that person is absent. You cannot command yourself not to notice their absence. You cannot completely control the sudden change in mood when you see them after not seeing them for a while. You cannot always prevent your attention from searching for them in a room before you even realize you are doing it. Eventually, the conflict becomes less about whether he has feelings and more about whether he is willing to acknowledge what those feelings have already changed inside him. That is the part people often miss. Acceptance is not the same thing as attraction. A man can have feelings and still refuse to accept them. He can understand exactly what is happening and still choose to explain it away. He can know that you matter and continue behaving as though you do not. Because accepting the feeling would require him to surrender the comfort of pretending that he is untouched. And sometimes that is why he seems closest when he is least prepared for it. When he is relaxed, distracted, or emotionally unguarded, the truth slips through. His attention becomes softer. His interest becomes natural. He stops calculating how much he is revealing. Then he notices himself, remembers the boundary he created, and retreats behind it again. You may have spent a long time trying to understand which version of him was real. The warm version or the distant version. The attentive version or the indifferent one. The men who seemed drawn toward you or the men who suddenly acted like nothing existed between you. Perhaps the answer was never that one of them was pretending. Perhaps the contradiction was the truth. He could genuinely feel something for you while genuinely fighting against feeling it. And that is what makes these connections so haunting. Sometimes the person who refuses to admit what he feels does not leave because nothing happened. He leaves because something happened that he did not know how to live with. The feeling becomes a private argument he carries alone, one side pulling him toward you and the other reminding him that wanting you means becoming vulnerable to something he cannot completely control. So if you ever wondered why someone could look at you as though you mattered and then behave as though you did not, understand what makes that contradiction possible. Feelings do not always create closeness. Sometimes they create resistance. Sometimes the stronger the emotion becomes, the more fiercely a person tries to explain it away. And perhaps the strangest part is that he may never confess it, even to himself in language he would willingly speak aloud. He may continue calling it curiosity, chemistry, comfort, coincidence, or nothing at all. But somewhere beneath all those explanations remains the uncomfortable fact he has been trying not to face: you became important before he decided whether he wanted you to be. And once someone becomes important, denial can hide the feeling from the world. It cannot always make the feeling disappear.